ומשמאלי גבריאל, ומלפניי אוריאל, ומאחריי רפאל, ועל ראשי שכינת אל.
What does that mean?
Angels are all around us.
It's Saturday, April 23rd, 2022 at 1:59 p.m. here locally in upstate New York. This is the One Harrieth Project's DiaryCast number 36, entitled Let Go. This is going to be a story of chaos to order and how spirit presents in some of the most interesting ways, bringing some of the most unique and curious messages. On the evening of Tuesday the 19th, I took the red-eye from Tacoma, Washington, to where I am now in the little town of Herkimer, New York, with interesting challenges that presented where I attempted to turn chaos into order. Then upon my arrival, that first overnight on Wednesday the 20th into Thursday the 21st at this new adventure location, I had a really hard time sleeping, mostly because I was on a new 3-hour time zone difference. That led to me waking up around 3 or 4 a.m. without being able to go back to sleep. So I opened up my computer and began to read a rhyme on a website that I visited from time to time. The rhyme was entitled Left Unsaid. There was a line in that rhyme that triggered a moment of pause for me around the phrase, let go, which led me to record and send a private audio to an acquaintance of mine where I talk about this concept relative to our exchanges over the last few years. As well, though it may seem insignificant, I also thought that I recalled hearing that phrase, let go, come up in a few intuitive tarot readings that I'd listened to over the last week. Now, none of those readings had made much of an impression out of the ordinary with me, as I usually watch them for the entertainment value contained in the stories that the readers share. So I reviewed those that I thought discussed this letting go concept on Thursday the 21st while I was unpacking and settling in. Then, on Thursday evening, the last day of this DiaryCast period, I was watching a Netflix series called Russian Doll, specifically Season 1, Episode 3. And at that point, I was stopped in my tracks. Finally, on Friday morning, the 22nd, a calendar reminder popped up that put a few of these unusual experiences over the last week in perspective. As a result, I went back to another intuitive tarot reading that I'd skipped a few weeks back by a reader whose unique way of expressing what she intuits always brings thought. I was curious if she'd picked up on this unusual set of circumstances that were happening all around me, some that I'm sharing herein in this DiaryCast, most that I'm not due to time restraints, and I found that she had actually tuned in to all of this strangeness that had occurred around me and was showing me what the other readers who'd focused on the present moment had not. She talked about its future potential. Now, to tell this tale of the weird and unusual, it's going to be easiest for me to mix and match the pieces out of order to offer the most understandable flow in the web of connections between them all. So let's begin. My flight from the Tacoma-Seattle airport left at 10 p.m. It was the first of 2 flights to get me to my ultimate destination the following morning, which was Syracuse, New York. From there, I took an Uber to my current location. The first flight was to North Carolina, was about 4.5 hours long, and left at 10 p.m. I was in seat 22F, which is a window seat. The young man who took the middle seat next to me was probably in his mid to late 20s, kind of reminded me of a 70s rock star with the most beautiful, wild, curly hair about shoulder length, jeans, and some kind of a t-shirt with a hoodie on. He seemed nice enough to begin with and was so thin that if he stood up sideways, you wouldn't be able to see him at all. The first thing he did when he sat down was to pull the hood over his head and kind of disappear, or at least that seemed to be his attempt. Shortly after that, he was approached by the flight attendant who asked him to confirm his seat because there was another young man who thought that seat was his. Sure enough, the airlines had actually booked both people into the same seat, which would have been 22E. The passenger currently occupying the seat seemed to handle himself quite well, so my first impression of him was, he's a normal kind of guy. And then the plane pulled out from its station position and began to go down the runway in wait to take off. All of a sudden, the gentleman next to me began using all these hand gestures while this hood was over his head. And I just watched him. I figured, maybe he's just tired. And then he began to talk to people that weren't there. Now, that isn't anything too unusual for me because I have run into plenty of people along my adventure trail that are just like that. My concern was for him. I wanted to make sure that he was going to be okay because we had a 4.5-hour flight in front of us. Now, what I had yet to mention is that in the seat directly in front of me was a screaming baby of maybe 6 months old, if that. And that lovely baby screamed the whole time we were in the air. I'm going to share a piece of that here so that you can hear how shrill his voice was. So let's take a look at this again. I have a screaming baby in the seat directly in front of me, and I have a gentleman sitting next to me who is detached from reality in some way. My only thought initially was that he must be on drugs, heroin or mescaline or something like that, and he was tweaking. Because he just kept jerking and, as I said, using hand gestures as if he's on a stage, which is another reason I thought rock star, because he acted as if he was doing a presentation of some kind to a room full of audience members, to a classroom of students, to a party full of frat boys. I didn't really know because I couldn't understand a thing he was saying, but I did notice how he was making his hand gestures. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, 4.5 hours of this, I thought I was going to be able to sleep. Now I remind you that this is a red eye, so it's 4.5 hours, and I thought that was probably the only time I would have to sleep because there was a 3-hour layover in North Carolina until I caught my flight to Syracuse. I assumed that on the Syracuse flight, which was only 2.5 hours, that I might be able to grab a quick nap, but there were no guarantees. So I was counting on this being my time to sleep. Now, before I tell the whole tale, let me just confirm for you that during the whole night, I got at least 30 minutes of sleep at the most. For the next 4 hours, I had to play kind of a game of tag trying to manage this chaos. The first 20 minutes, I have to admit, I was a little frustrated simply because I'm in a window seat and I can't escape. I can't even get up and stretch my legs. I can't lean up too far because the baby is at the top of the seat for the most part, screaming right in my face. And the guy next to me was falling on me throughout the whole flight. He was in a state somewhere between consciousness and unconsciousness the whole time. When he was in the state of consciousness, as I said, he was talking to people who weren't there and using these broad hand gestures that I was concerned that he might just smack me in the face. Seriously. And then he started, leaning in my direction more and more and more until ultimately his head rested on my shoulder. At first, and now this being more than 20 minutes into it, I had found my way through meditation and just trying to go within to release and relax into the flow of this chaos and attempt to kind of put a bubble around myself so that I could have order within, more as an observer, while not actually feeling like I was a part of the process, so I could maintain my calm. So when he first fell on my shoulder, the first time, the second time, and the third time, I just let him, because he seemed at his most relaxed, and that's what I wanted for him. But then his head started falling more and more down my chest, almost in my lap. And so I finally had to politely tap him on the knee, and I said, "Excuse me, I don't mean to be rude, but you're sleeping on me. Could you possibly sit up and maybe shift in your seat so that you're facing in a direction where your weight is balanced enough that you can lean back into your seat?" And he started laughing and said, "Oh, I can't believe I even did that. No way." Just giggling and, basically back to a state of normality in the same kind of personality that he had shown to the flight attendant. But it wasn't a few minutes later that he began to nod off again in my direction. So this time I thought I was getting smart. I found out later you can call it anything but. I leaned up. I'm most comfortable meditating or just simply going within when I have really good posture, with my feet flat on the ground and my back straight. Of course, that left me right up at the seat back of the one in front of me, where the screaming baby was constantly letting me know of its existence. But I thought, okay, well, I've got to make, the best of this, so it's the best of two evils, right? This time, though, when he was leaning over, he literally took on a 45-degree angle so that from his waist to his head, he was leaning back into my seat in its entirety, resting his chest area on the armrest, and his head was right behind my back. So I turn around and I see sometimes his eyes are open and sometimes they're closed. He's beginning to hand gesture and talk to people that aren't there, but he's not really conscious, and yet he's right behind my back in my seat. So you get the picture. I mean, I could go on and on, but that basically went on for the entire 4.5-hour flight. I have to tell you that there is one side note that I have had numerous experiences, mostly with folks who appear to be homeless. Many of them are in the same kind of state as this gentleman, kind of not really in a full state of reality, as if they're walking in this dimension, but they're actually experiencing something in another one. And I've gotten the most compelling spiritual messages from these interesting characters, almost as if they have been embodied by something otherworldly for the purpose of communicating with me. So, of course, because of his conduct, I kind of had that fleeting thought of, I wonder. But again, I didn't get much out of him except for a single line, and that line was, "Follow the thread of logic and you will find the truth." That's the only thing he said the entire 4.5 hours that I actually comprehended. And as you'll hear in this clip, which is from Sasha Bonasin, that came up in this calendar entry on Friday morning, the morning after the end of this DiaryCast period, I began to understand the broader message that was being shared.
The bottom line is, on the 17th of April, there is a huge moment that you will have. And it's the first time in a long time that you will have the beginning of understanding of a very specific aspect of your life, which is at the same time, going to start the process for you reaching towards enlightenment. In fact, in between the 17th of April and the end of that month, at the same time, there is a very specific sign that you are going to have from the Spirit. And what this sign from the Spirit is going to tell you, it's going to happen in the middle of the night when you least expect it. In between the 17th of April and the end of April, there is going to be the Spirit that is going to come through, the Spirit that is going to come forward, and you will know almost immediately, for some reason, who this is. You will almost immediately you're going to feel a very, very strong connection, and that Spirit is going to kind of like maybe scare you, just to scare you a little bit, because it's going to happen at the time when you least expect it, somewhere in the dark, in the dark evening, dark night. I can really feel the energy and vibration of the actual evening, and that spirit, you see, it's going to pretty much so going to happen at around the time when you are that you are worrying about something that you shouldn't be worrying about. This is so important, my God, yeah. So you just need to connect and reconnect. When you see that spirit, you will be worrying about something so much. I'm telling you, it's going to happen at a time when you least expect it. So that spirit is just going to like really gently remind you, don't worry about things that you can't do anything about right now, one step at a time. So this spirit is having a very, very important message for you, my gorgeous Aquamarini.
So I catch my second flight, which itself was eventful, but I will keep that to myself for time purposes, and I made my way here. That night, I had a hard time sleeping due to the time changes, so I opened my computer, went to a website called The Rememberings, and read the first entry there, which was left unsaid. When I read the lines, "Here we have a perfect time to let go," just like a rhyme, I was triggered, and I didn't expect to be, but I thought, wait a minute. Didn't I hear a few readers talk about letting go in their Aquarius readings for this last week? So later on this day, I actually looked at them. But my first impulse was to reach out to a one-time acquaintance and talk to that acquaintance about the concept of letting go as it related to some of the things that we had exchanged in the last few years. Here's a bit of that private audio recording. But it is a gift that I have, and when I share it, I make a difference in people's lives. So I'm very cautious about who I talk to about it, but I test the waters, and if I see that it's being received, then I let a little more go and a little more go. So you are heard. I do that a lot. I post things places in hopes that it might have a future benefit for someone. Just like I leave all of my photos that I've been creating for 20 years somewhere online, because in 100 or 1,000 years, that data might be unarchived by someone, and it might have an influence or an impact at that later time. So I don't do much of what I do publicly for the purpose of ego or vanity, or I think I'm right, or I'm compelled to, say this to the world. I do it and I let it go, and do it and let it go in hopes that maybe, just maybe, it might, have a benefit somewhere with someone at some time. And that's the whole reason I do all of the things that I do. And I know that's unusual, but I look at the world in a different way than the average person. Later on Thursday, the 21st, that last day of the DiaryCast period, I reviewed those tarot reading videos that I thought had potentially talked about letting go. I started with my favorite reader, who's James Strong. He has a YouTube channel called James 13 Wicca. Here's an excerpt from his Aquarius reading where he talks about letting go. And I'll follow that one with an excerpt from his Gemini reading, which he talks about in the Aquarius reading, which also talks about letting go.
Yeah, I feel like just let it go. I know that sounds weird. Don't wait your whole life away for somebody who doesn't want to show up. They don't want to show up, accept it, move forward without them. Just accept it, let it be. It's hard when you step back. It's like, I hope I'm not giving too many analogies here, but I feel like this is what this situation is. Accepting it for what it is and just moving your energy forward from it so you can be more in a happier energy. It's kind of like these moments have to happen in life where they just suck. Technically, just suck. But it's kind of like we don't have to live in that energy. We don't have to spend months in that energy. It lasts an hour or two, maybe a day or two where it's just really bad. Say it lasts 2 or 3 days. It's just really bad. It sucks. We don't like it. And maybe that was as far as it had to go. And then we just, instead of holding on to that for the next 7 or 8 months, we're just kind of like, you know what? It did. It wasn't good. I didn't like it. But I have to process it, step away from it, and let it go. I don't want to take it with me forward. If I take it with me forward, it just drags down my life. That's no good. I don't want that. So start working towards letting it go. Typically, it takes a little work to let it go, yeah. But the sooner we decide to move on from it and let it go, sooner things start getting better. All right, well, if I haven't beat the horse to death, it's definitely dead now. So I'm letting it go. I could do this the easy way and just kind of accept it and move on, or I could try to fight it. This is one of those situations where I feel like the advice is just to see it for what it is and just let it go. I feel like you have the ability to do that in this one. Kind of like, well, if that's what it's really made of and the other person doesn't really want to be around me anyway, they're not seeing the value of me and they've decided to move on, I just don't see you broken up. You're not liking it. I don't see you liking it. But in the same token, I'm kind of feeling like it wasn't really working anyway. If this is hitting, let's take it with a grain of salt, because the energy is going more in your favor. I feel like this is kind of like, this wasn't working for me anyway. Being authentic and getting to know yourself more? No. Getting to know that this is how this dynamic was working. Kind of like, maybe, you know, this is who this person is, whoever it is to you. Doesn't have to be romantic, I keep saying that. But whatever it is, they're moving on without you, or they're making decisions without you. And let's even use, just be fair, if it's a work situation, and you're trying to move ahead, and people are just passing you by, you know, the authenticity of that is realizing you're not valued here the way you should be. So maybe if you really have aspirations of advancing in life, maybe it's time to look for other options. I feel like I say that a lot with Gemini, but maybe I'm wrong. Because I'm getting like, from this moment, that's where your true value is going to come in. That's where your stability is going to come in. Kind of like, okay, this isn't working. It's painfully obvious. I'm not really loving it, but I'm seeing it for what it is. So now, ball's in my court. What am I going to do with this? Where can we go with this? Where's the, like, what's a good first step for Gemini for this to go their way? 10 of Pentacles, that's already there. And then the 17, which is the Star card. What do you want? Time to go for what you really want. It wasn't working anyway is what I'm keeping. If this is hitting, it wasn't working anyway. So having the compassion to just let it go, to get it out of your way. Kind of like, let's just let it go. Let's just be as peaceful and as cooperative, as respectful. Like, you shouldn't be at a detriment because of this. Like, you know, but respectfully, being respectful to yourself, let it go. Like, we don't have to prove anything here. You want to go, great, go. But, you know, what's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. Whatever's going on. I'm like, I'm trying to end it, but I'm not sure if I should be ending it yet. I don't think we have to argue about this. If you just let this go, I feel like it'll go in your favor. I feel like you have control. Like, if they want to go anyway, so okay, let's just be diplomatic about it. Let's be civil about it. Move on. Whether it be work, relationship, whatever you got going on. I feel the more peaceful we can let it go, the quicker the good comes back in. 'Cause there's better out there for you. It's time to get the better. No use to wasting the time on any discord. Fair is fair, and we'll do from there. We'll go from there. Fair is fair, and we'll go from there. Apparently, I'm in the rhyming mood today. Every now and then, I've done it.
I followed that by visiting the YouTube channel by the author called Miriam Kramer and rewatched her Aquarius reading that she posted on Monday, which would have been the 18th. Here's an excerpt from that reading.
And you're trying to think a way around it. Yeah, this is having to tell someone that something isn't going to work. And it's not going to be able to go forward. Now, some of you may be receiving this in your dreams. Some of you may have a dream and have that inspiration of understanding that something isn't going to go forward. Part of the challenge here is that someone is fixated on letting it go. They don't want to let it go. They don't want to let it go. Yeah, the Six of Pentacles in the upright here with the Emperor card is that they want to try to give it another chance. They want to try to give it another go. And the message that comes in is basically saying, you know, you don't have control over this.
Now I was really intrigued, so I started taking a gander at some of the other YouTubers who had posted aqua readings during the last DiaryCast period, who I trust. I won't be including any of them here due to time constraints, but I can tell you there were a half a dozen others. It really blew my mind. But I'm a synchronicity baby, so any kind of cool coincidence like that always makes me smile and pay attention and recognize that I am connected to whatever frequency is trying to speak with me at that particular moment in time. Now comes Thursday evening. I'm sitting with dinner in my new place, and I'll be here for about 6 weeks, and decided I'd watch a little Netflix. So I open it, select Russian Dolls, and begin watching episode 3 of season 1. I don't know, about a quarter to a halfway through, I hear this exchange between the main character's ex-boyfriend and a rabbi who talks about mysticism. What made this so interesting for me was not just that topic came up, considering the few days I'd just had, but the premise of the show is that the main character keeps dying and dying and dying, and each time she dies, she wakes up back in the exact same spot where she had begun before. So it's like a loop. Now remember what Sasha said, I would see a spirit between the 17th and the 30th. In my case, I think that I've seen 2. One was in real life, sitting next to me on that plane from Tacoma to North Carolina, and the other was here in this program called Russian Doll. So let me share that excerpt with the rabbi talking about mysticism here.
Mysticism teaches that there is wisdom inaccessible to the intellect. You can only reach it through surrender, being nothing. Turn away from the physical world and turn toward the spiritual one. Maybe Nadia is just a way to stay distracted. Avoid the abyss when embracing it is the only way forward.
Right. And that building she's asking about isn't really haunted.
Yeah, buildings aren't haunted. People are.
I have to admit that after that program ended, instead of watching more, I put my dishes in the sink, ran some water in them, and decided to truly review everything that had happened in the last few days since I left Tacoma, just to see what came. It's hard to put into words what I came out of that meditation with, but let me try. I felt like I had successfully found a way to turn the chaos that was swirling around me on that first flight into order, divine order, that was allowing me to have tolerance and to be patient and to, in some kind of inexplicable way, to be able to find a kind of grace in that experience and to accept that I had no control except of myself. I also came to understand that the young man sitting in the seat next to me was a divine orchestration, bringing this man, his unusual ways, to me so that I could get the message of finding a thread of logic to discover truth. The thread of logic to find the truth, for me in that situation, meant the world is logical. Everyone expects it to run logically. But this was not logical, not any of it. Yet it existed, and I was sandwiched between it, between the shrill cries of the baby and the tweaks of this possible meth addict. So therein lies the truth that logic isn't always the only thread in the fabric of life. I also came out of it recognizing that everything that had been presented was about the present. But I was really curious what was going to happen next. Because with all the chaos, both that shared in this DiaryCast and so much more that I'm just not able to share here because of time restraints, I knew that something was up. And that's when this state of meditation brought something back to me. And that is the most chaotic times that I have ever experienced in my life, whether they were directly, let's say, aimed in my direction, were always followed, and I mean always, with this heightened state of illumination, of spiritual connection, and when I would get the most profound knowledge and experiences. For example, I'm going to share a link in the description section that will show you a video that I took in Brisbane, Australia in January of 2018. I was walking down these vast bridges that all lead to the Nepalese Peace Pagoda, a Buddhist temple. And I heard in my head, turn around and film that. And I thought to myself, film what? I don't see anything. So I took a few steps back and I looked down and I saw this shadow moving on the walkway. And I thought, film this? So I did. And when I was filming it, I didn't actually notice anything unusual. But when I watched the video, that's when I could see the magic. There was a consciousness in form, but that form was created by the shadows of the trees that were blowing in the wind and casting a shadow down onto the walkway. That's one of those profound moments. I've had so many, I just don't have time to share them. So now I'm aware that something is coming, and I'm so excited about it, and I know that it isn't anything I can plan for or anticipate. It is always unique, comes out of the blue, and strikes me with great profundity. So that's when I reached out on Friday morning after seeing the Sasha video and making all of these connections to how everything sort of wove itself into a web of possibilities, that I wanted to see if maybe I could siphon out some messages or information to show me what comes next, to show me the future. And that's when I got this thought in my head, which is usually how it works, to go back and watch a video that I hadn't before. It was by a reader named Santero, and she has such a unique, intuitive way of presenting the information she sees in front of her that I always get this great wisdom, whether it's my sign or another sign, that I love to take into states of contemplation and meditation and ponder. So I got the nudge to take a look, and I did. And what I found was exactly what I was looking for. She took all that had happened, confirmed it for me in ways that may only be understandable by me, and then she gave me what I asked for, a peek into what's next. I'll share that excerpt here.
So whatever this is for you, whatever this is representing, this new phase of learning, the phase of learning a new process, or how this process, it's almost like you've stumbled into a process with somebody else that's just fascinating you to the point where you're studying it, and in studying it there's so much to learn, right? And you're very much enjoying that. It's feeling very like rewarding and settling, like peaceful. Okay, and then the Six of Cups here. This is interesting. The Six of Cups and the Fool coming after the Empress. There's something here about, well, there's this. It's like this gap has been filled. There's been some kind of a gap, or a gap in your understanding, or a gap in your understanding of your past, perhaps. That's what the Six of Cups talks about, right? This kind of looking back. There's been this hole in your understanding, or there's been this hole in your heart, or there's hole in your life. There's this hole here in the center, right? And that is now filled here with the Empress energy. Even though it might still be a long process ahead, there's this knowing or understanding of fulfillment. It's already filling that gap, or fulfilling that missing piece, which is allowing you to move into the Fool energy. So there's something here about, there's been this kind of antagonizing energy or problem or mystery that's been kind of tied into your past, or it could just be seen as the past. There's something about your past that you've really been struggling with, but this new situation and this new learning, which is bringing you into the Empress energy, is overcoming that. It's overcoming that, right? It's filling that hole and allowing you to move forward in the Fool energy. It's like the ability to finally leave that behind, whatever that was. It's like there's been this thing with you from your past, and it's just being left behind now. You're moving very easily into the Fool energy and the Seven of Wands, which is interesting because the Seven of Wands, a little bit like the Six of Wands, talks to me about kind of a vision that you hold of your future. I think because it's a kind of this crystal ball energy, it's like when you look into the crystal ball or you look into your psyche, you have this vision of your future. But there's something about this Six of Cups card, which is your past. So by resolving whatever this is, coming to filling that gap, closing the gap there, it's allowing you to move into almost like a new vision of your future. So it's almost like with this letting go of the past is also letting go maybe of a future that you, or maybe maybe you had a blockage and you weren't really seeing your future, or you didn't really have a sense of your future. That could be what this gap is, right? So now that that's been corrected, it's like now you can see your future. So this is falling away. Does that make sense? So either way, it's kind of like an easy movement into a future vision or a future chapter of your life, because whatever this has been hanging around you or hanging onto for a really long time is now easily falling away because of this Empress energy. You see what I'm saying? So, and then the Six of Materials here. This always talks to me about co-creation, finding or coming together with somebody that is everything that we're describing here. So it could be something like, perhaps tied into this energy here, there's almost this rewriting or reconsidering of your future because you're resolving something from your past that maybe was blocking or kind of mucking up your idea or your willingness to be in this energy here. The Six of Pentacles is kind of like a Two of Cups card for me, right? It's kind of like finding somebody that has that ability to amplify anything that you are putting out. It's one of those energies that's so incredibly supportive that the energy and the momentum just builds and builds and builds, because everything that you talk about with them, it's so embraced and supported and understood and kind of reflected back to you that there's this bouncing back and forth that really is like bringing in new, it's like that masterminding energy, right? It's like the two of you together kind of bring each other to a next level because you kind of, it's almost like because you can, it's like if you're chewing on an issue or you're working through something and kind of just going through it on your own and going through it and going through it and going through it. But then when you find this person, you're able to kind of like blah all of this. You say all of this. This is what I'm working. This is what I'm working on. This is what I'm chewing on right now. And you just give it to them, and they go, "Yeah, I totally get it." And they send it back to you, right? And then every time it goes back and forth, there's just progression that is made, right? So perhaps there's something here about kind of being on your own in a sense, or trying to overcome a past relationship, something like that. And so maybe really kind of not seeing any kind of future potential of working or collaborating or partnering with somebody. So now that it's interesting because you're kind of partnering with somebody in order to let that go. So it's almost like you needed to accept somebody else into your life in order to realize that this can go away, and you can absolutely do powerful and exciting and playful things with somebody else, because you're experiencing it, right? It's almost like by accident, because this is very unassuming. It's kind of like you just happen to be in the same place at the same time. And so one of you says to the other, "Hey, since we're both here, do you want to do this together?" Right? And as you come together and do this together, it's like everything is really opening up to you. And so therefore you are now opening up to this, perhaps. You see what I'm saying? Because that seems to be part of your new future vision, is kind of like this partnering energy. So it could just be like having to let go of an ex or something like that, having to overcome some misunderstanding or some wounding about relationships maybe, or about partnerships. It could be something like that. It's almost like there's a bit of a kink in your energy about co-creating or partnering up. And it's almost like it snuck up on you because it's like that, but it's not really what I'm doing here, which is the reason why you're accepting this invitation in a sense. It's like, we're both here. Why don't we just do this together? And it's like, yeah, okay, why not? And then by the end of it, it's like, we have to do everything together. Something like that.
So it's time to let go. Let go of people that no longer serve me. Let go of circumstances that may be holding me back. Let go of energies that were chaotic so that I can reach for divine order and allow myself to step into the new. And with that, I will leave it here.